Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon now. It's 12 o'clock. I'd like to welcome you to this month's edition of Conversations with the Mayor. And my name is Mark S. Lee, and will be your host for the next 30 to 35 minutes on a very, very important topic we're going to be addressing today. Just a couple of housekeeping details. Number one, please make sure that you keep yourselves on mute. Do not unmute yourself, please. Number two, we would ask you not to show your video. Make sure you stop your video as you're entering. Number three, as we get into the conversation, we want you to drop your questions into the chat room. We have a lot of time this afternoon for you to answer any questions that you may have. We may not get to all the questions. If we do, great. If we don't, we will certainly chronicle those questions and get back to you as well. So again, my name is Mark Lee. It's my honor to be here. And I'm the president and CEO of the Lee Group, which is a major marketing organization here in Metro Detroit. And I also host a radio show on 19 AM, the superstation called In the Conference Room. All right, with that said and done, we're going to jump right into it. I'd like to welcome.
The light isn't on.
I'm sorry. I would like to welcome our very special guest, including the mayor, and I want to introduce them individually, and then they're going to come back and give a statement. But Mayor Deidre Waterman joins us. Also like to welcome City Attorney Anthony Chubb, Tony Chubb. Also like to welcome City Attorney and Advisor Matthew Gibb, and the Chairman of the Oakland University Pontiac Initiative, Mr. Thomas Kimball. I'd like to welcome all of you for joining us today. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules for the next few minutes to engage in this conversation. At this point, what I'd like to do is to turn it over to Mayor Waterman, and each individual panelist will have 90 seconds for opening statements. Mayor, I'd like to start with you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you once again. We announced the State of the City that I had back last June, where you were the guest celebrity, that we would start having you involved in helping this messaging that I'm getting out to the city. There are so many things going on in the city of Pontiac, the city of interest. We have done a number of PSAs, especially during COVID-19, but there are other topics in which you had an interest, and you're sharing with me now, and this is the third in the series we're calling Conversations with the Mayor. There's so much going on in Pontiac that people want to know about, that it's hard each month to decide which topic to do. There's social justice, there is the census going on, there's voter registrations going on, all the things, there's 38 new building projects. But today we chose the Phoenix Center. This is a saga that's been going on. It certainly was one of the things that occupied a lot of my attention as I became mayor. As the people who will recall, and we'll get more of the history from some of the people who will speak that I have chosen as panelists today on this topic. But we started as mayor back in 2014, and I jumped into a situation where the city was deep in litigation from the matter of the Phoenix Center, where the emergency manager at that time had ordered the building not only demolished, but also doubled down and said it to be condemned, only to find out that there were certain easement rights that the owners had of the Ottawa Towers. And so this litigation had become quite a conundrum, and had gone through 3 different mediations by the time I became mayor. And finally, I was able to convince the judge over the case to give us one more chance at mediation, because this was not going to be a great situation for the city if it went down the way the litigation was going. So we were able to get, after 19 months under Judge Gerald Rosen being the court-appointed mediator, to be able to turn defeat into a victory, a win-win for the city, in which we were able to maintain ownerships of the garage. But we had 2 years under a settlement agreement to fulfill the terms of that settlement agreement, to do the repairs that the city hadn't had the money to do for 12 years. But now that we had righted the fiscal situation of the city. So given that, we wanted to tell you what's happening since then. That 2 years that started in November 18th, November 2018, when the City Council did sign and ratify the settlement agreement, which set the clock running for the 2 years to fulfill the terms. And those 2 years are coming due November 1st of this year. So this is something that a lot of people now are waking up to in terms of that time clock that we're telling people about. And I'm so happy to have several people here who are helped to tell that story and to get out the information, because we want people to be apprised of the real situation, the real information. So many people who are going to be affected by this, who are owners, who are influential leaders in the city, want to know how they can play a role and what is the effect on the city and on their businesses also by this matter. With me today, and I'll introduce first, is the city attorney, Anthony Chubb. He is the city attorney representing the city from the law firm of GMH, and he is going to tell us something about the saga and the history that I have just summarized here. And he has been involved through GMH's law firm, G. Marco, Mullins, and Horton, since the inception of working with the emergency manager and the original lawsuits, following all the way through the mediation until where we are now. So he is the one who often represents this issue at the city council meetings and other meetings. So he will tell you more about that history, followed by Matt Gibb. Many of you know from his days as being a director of the home department and executive Oakland County director. He has since joined the city of Pontiac as special counsel, particularly for real estate issues. And he's found that there's a couple of issues which are occupying with their volatility most of his time. So he's going to tell you how he's been handling the matters as they've gone on from there and where we stand right now in terms of the settlement agreement and some recent decisions of city council that many of you are quite concerned about. And then we will follow by another great friend of the city of Pontiac, that is Tom Kimball. And he has too many titles for me to take the time to enumerate right here, but he is past executive director of the Michigan AARP, very important citizen to the senior citizens of this community, as well as he is the point person and co-chair of the Pontiac Oakland University Initiative, which is now in its 6th year of formation. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Attorney Chubb, and he will start us off by giving us some of the legal history and the wrangling that's gone on through the mediation.
And Attorney Chubb, before you take over, I do want to excuse me, acknowledge that this is in fact being recorded, and it's also being shown live on Facebook Live. And lastly, I know we have a couple of officials, so I would like to acknowledge State Senator Rosemary Bayer as well for participating as well. Attorney Chubb, all yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor and everyone. Good to see we have such great participation. I know we have a lot of interest in this because, as the mayor said, this has been such a long coming saga. And so I think it's really important to remember this does go back to the emergency manager who early on in emergency management days first decided to quit maintaining the Phoenix Center and let it fall into a state of such disrepair over a number of years that it then made the decision to knock it down and condemn it. And unfortunately, that was done without the foresight to review the easements that many buildings, including the Ottawa Towers, had to the property. And that's what resulted in the litigation being initiated. And the litigation went on for years. And when the Waterman administration came in, they quickly noted that the reality is the Phoenix Center is a key asset of the city, and it's a key to the redevelopment of downtown. And so I think that really changed the perspective of negotiations to understand that the city wanted to maintain ownership of the Phoenix Center and to bring it back to a usable condition on all levels. And so that is where the negotiations ended up. As the mayor noted, that was in November of 2018. And as part of that, in making that determination, the city did obtain a report from IDS that showed that the cost of that was just over $18 million. The city council was made aware of that report and agreed to the settlement. That is, they voted to support that settlement in late October of 2018, which started that 2-year clock that the mayor mentioned on November 1st of 2018. Thereafter, the administration moved to ensure that we could fulfill the obligations of the settlement agreement. And the first step of that was to seek bonding to pay for those $18 million of repairs. And so shortly after that date, the mayor brought in experts that showed how we would move forward with bonding and the likely costs in doing so. And thereafter sought approval from the council to make notice to the public of the bonds, which is the first step to obtaining those bonds. The council unfortunately declined and voted against allowing the city to move forward in that respect. Subsequent conversations took place over a period of, well, Mayor, I think it was over a year. And we brought that resolution back to council multiple times, seeking to get those bonds with the understanding that the city, although it's in great fiscal condition now because of a lot of the changes the mayor made, we simply don't have a savings account of $18 million to pay cash for these improvements. And so subsequent, when we figured out that the council was seemingly not willing to move forward with the bonding, we thereafter sought to use, and the council subsequently moved $7 million from our surplus into the Phoenix Center account, indicating that they wanted to move forward with construction using those $7 million. Again, the mayor very quickly sought to engage an engineering firm, and we engaged AUK as our overseeing engineer, and they moved forward with getting all of the bids completed. We put out the bids for $7 million for that work, noting that it really was not the best way to move forward, but that was what the council was allowing. And we got back those bids just about a month ago now and brought them to the council for approval. And so we're surprised that the council again voted down that work that they had dedicated money to do. And so that's left us in a situation where the last step was a offer that the council president read into the record a week ago yesterday from the owner of the Ottawa Towers that was a public-private partnership potential. And our special economic counsel, Matt Gibb, wanted to go into closed session to discuss the opportunities involved with that last night, but the council voted against that closed session. And so that's kind of where we are. And that leaves us with 1 month until the 2-year clock deadline approaches.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And I think that's a nice segue into engaging Matt Gibb. He invoked your name, Matt. We'll give you 90 seconds or so to provide an overview and a perspective as you see it.
Thanks, Mark, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mayor, for including me and bringing me on the Pontiac team. A lot of people have asked, and the mayor alluded, well, what is Matt Gibb's role in the city, and is he jack of all trades, and what does he do? Well, I'm special legal counsel. The mayor was kind enough to offer to bring me in to work in complete support of the excellent work that Attorney Chubb and his colleagues at Gianmarco are doing on behalf of the city. But special legal counsel essentially means, hey, can you fix this, right? Can you find a solution with the help of all of our partners? And so picking up on where the mayor and Tony have left off, I'm sure most on this call and most that'll watch this really want to know, well, what's the status? I mean, like, where are we at? We get it, all right? The settlement agreement was agreed and approved and ratified by council back in September, October of 2018. And here we are going into September of 2020. What does that all mean, right? So there's been a tremendous amount of options put on the table, but what it really means is this: 66 days. Everybody that's looking at this town hall and is following up on these words, that's what you have to think. It's 66 days. 66 days from now will be November 1st. November 1st is the deadline that's very express in the settlement agreement. When you enter a settlement agreement with the court in this fashion, it's entered in the form of a judgment. And so for all of you that have never gone through that experience, if you had a judgment against you for, say you had to you had to replace the garage on your house because there was a fire and you decide just not to do it. Well, the ramifications are it's in the form of a judgment. There's damages that happen. In the case of the city, what we're facing now in 66 days is a pretty straightforward procedure, meaning if the city continues to do nothing, and in this case, we've presented to council proposals for bonding. We've presented to council on May 1st of this year a complete schematic package that showed all the work that would have to get done, the cost estimates behind that. When they limited the funding, as Attorney Chubb said, we presented bids. Everything's been turned down. So the council's rejected bond funding to do the whole project. They've rejected using partial funding. They rejected last night a closed session to try to look at a public-private partnership opportunity. And what does that mean? That means in 66 days, the owner of the Ottawa Towers, the plaintiff in the litigation, can file a pleading with the court and what they call supplemental proceedings and saying the city defaulted. They're in breach of their agreement. So what does that mean for the city? Well, we know that based upon the work of IDS and AUK, that there's at least $16.8 million worth of work that they've estimated that is critical and necessary to get done. That means that the plaintiff can go ask the court, well, let me do that work, but the city's going to have to pay for it. So 16.8 million of damages would be almost a certainty, if not more. Well, it's been 2 years. The work can't get done by November 1st. So the plaintiff would be asking for additional damages, saying, well, I still can't rent my building. The tenancies are still impaired. The parking's still not improved. So what are all those damages? We know because we've received communication from the owner really saying the city is in what they call anticipatory breach, a legal term that basically says, I know you're going to default. So let's quit playing games here. He's really estimated $5 to $6 million of additional damages. So we know that on November 1st, absent the city taking some very critical substantive action, that's the ask. It's court, find the city in default of the agreement that they agreed to back in September, October of 2018. Find that they've breached that agreement by failing to do anything, failing to bond, failing to bid, failing to public-private partner. All of those efforts being really frustrated because we can't get even to a council meeting to ask for them to engage over the last several months. So what that means is in November, the plaintiff will ask, I would like damages. And what would those damages be? Well, they might be as high as $30 million, as many of you have heard before. And what does it mean for the city? Well, the city doesn't have $30 million. If the city had $30 million sitting around someplace, we would be done with this, which is the question of bonding. And so, Mark, I'll save some more comments for some of the questions that might come. But I would just say that my part is to find solutions, and we do have some definitive solutions that can be chased down. There's investors that want to invest. There's people that love Pontiac that want to help with this. They all need certainty, and that certainty has to come from an engaged collaboration between council and all of the tremendous effort that the mayor's office is doing to create certainty that they can come and offer investment to help the city through this in a way that they know that the city will come through. And I wanted to explain that last night at the closed session, but they decided not to have that session. So I'll save other remarks, and I'm ready to answer questions, my friend.
All right, so
Yes,
we're gonna
Mark.
do
And may I interject at this point, Mark, as Matt finishes that statement in this conversation that we're having now, that you've been so great to understand what's going on in Pontiac and moderating this for us. But I want to emphasize certain things. I hear Matt's frustration. He has worked so hard, so diligently, has seen all these kinds of economic development issues in so many other instances. And he, as in the, 6 months now, Matt, are you beginning to, one time he was counting the days, so now we're down to months, that he's been here. He's just found it incredulous that at every stop of the turn, there seems to be some obstacle. And council knows, and he's told them over and over again, no, we're working on a timeline here. You signed this agreement. And so he's just been incredulous that step after step, council will do one thing. And there's 4 members who are kind of leading the pack here, who each time have kind of reversed what we decided, 5 months ago, 6 months ago.
Okay.
So that's what the problem is here. And that's what we want to reveal, because under COVID-19, everybody has been doing Zoom conferences and nobody really knows a lot of what's going on. Well, now there's a lot of leaders who've stepped up, who've asked, tell us about this, keep us involved, because now they're feeling a kind of a responsibility and ownership of trying to see that we come to a better solution for this, given the circumstances we have right now. So I feel your pain. All of us are doing that, but here, that's why we're doing this, because we want to make sure that people have good information. Because as you said, even last night, it's just hard to get that information out over council meetings. So that's why we've turned more and more to this media, where we can be open and clear with people about the situation, to the extent that we want to empower people with the real information. That's the other reason Tom Kimball is here. And I just wanted to say that in addition to that, that as we've talked about the alternative that are presented to council, and once again, this is council's decision to make, how you finance that. The settlement agreement from the very beginning, when they signed the settlement agreement, originally the talk was of bonds. That has changed over time, but we have not sit flat-footed and just looked at bonds. We have presented all kinds of alternatives, including the sale of the Phoenix Garage. We've had a number of offers for sale, public-private partnerships. We presented any number of different ways to work out the solution and get the financing for the Phoenix Center Garage, only to have every one of them turned down. So it's we just want to have that public perception that the ball's in council's hands. It always has been. And they've said, no, 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 we need them to say, yes, it's their decision to make, and we need that decision to be made. As we move forward, our options become more limited. I just wanted to interject that, Matt,
Okay,
at
I
this
appreciate that,
point,
Mayor.
as you proceed on with the next
Absolutely.
panelist here.
Again, before I turn on to Tom, if you have questions, please drop your questions in the chat room. Please drop your questions in the chat room. From a business perspective, I'd like to introduce Mr. Thomas Kimball, who's been involved, and he's got some, would like to share the business perspective as this project has evolved. Tom?
Thank you, Mark. And I got to start right away by saying this is a legacy issue for me, this Phoenix Center. Back in 1980, 40 years ago, I was put on a special assignment with General Motors to look at consolidating all truck activities in one spot and form a General Motors truck group. And boy, I tell you, it was very difficult for me to sit there and see that they wanted to move the truck division to the tech center. Almost there, decision almost made. And I got wind of thought that Pontiac was looking at an urban renewal plan, talked to the people and found out, yep, they had a building thought would cost $23 million, almost like the money we're talking today. All right, 23 million, but they couldn't find any financing. Went back to General Motors and said, hey, look, let's move this thing to Pontiac. And we can put all 4,000 people in 2 facilities there. And General Motors agreed with me. And from that, we signed a 30-year lease to develop the Phoenix Center. So this is important to me that that place still thrives. But from a business perspective, there are a lot of business people, a lot of corporations want to assure the long-term growth of Pontiac, and they're willing to invest. But they're very frightened to invest because if this thing goes belly up, they cannot get their investment capital back. And if there's any potential that it will go bankrupt and a new, what they call them, managers, not a city manager, but emergency manager comes in, all their assets could be taken away. So it's very important that the city, the community come together and make some definitive decisions as to what the plan is to move forward. Matthew said it, business people want certainty. And when then there's not certainty, when they invest their capital, it costs them a whole lot more because their lenders, because of the uncertainty, will charge them very accelerated interest rates. Their cost of capital will go up through the roof if the city doesn't make the right decisions. Not only do they want to invest in the center, but all across Pontiac, it could have an unfavorable impact. So I encourage everyone to make the right decisions for future growth of this city, Mark.
And Tom, I think, and thank you very much. A couple questions here. You alluded to something very important, and people certainly want to invest in Pontiac. This is a thriving area, it's a growing area. From a marketing standpoint, it's another way to sell the Pontiac to the region, quite candidly. But when you have something like this potentially, it can impact that overall image of the city and how it deals with the rest of the county and beyond. So my question, Matt, back over to you. You mentioned 66 days, and you mentioned something about a judgment essentially and damages. So what is there a legal, what can you do legally, if anything, to bring these parties together to resolve this issue before then? That's question number one. And then question number two, Tom invoked something about the emergency manager. If for some reason nothing's accomplished by November 1st, is the city of Pontiac in danger financially again?
Well, that's a big question, and I'm still trying to get over the fact that Tom Kimball was working here 40 years ago. He looks like he's 32 years old. So
He does, doesn't he?
I don't know what he's even talking about. But aside from that, a big question mark. So the November 1st deadline is the deadline in the settlement document that was entered as a judgment. But the parties agreed that they would return to mediation if there was, other details of their impasse. And so our good city attorneys have coordinated. We'll be headed back to mediation in late October. That's an opportunity to see if we can't mediate these, the result of this. And it's the same process that ended up in the settlement agreement. Now, as a good attorney, I will tell you that it won't be as openly favorable as it was when they were trying to settle the case. This is more directed towards what are you going to get done going forward. And so there is a process to get the owner of the Ottawa Towers together with the city. And that process is going to happen. And then after November 1, if there's not a way through it at that point, then they would be left to the remedy. And the reference to emergency management is a very real one. I mean, the city went through emergency management, 3 different emergency managers, based upon decisions that were long before the good leadership we have now. But the reality is that the city got itself into a fiscal position that it had way too much debt, not enough assets or cash flow. And so the state appointed those emergency managers. The potential of being exposed to this particular matter would risk the city getting back into that position, is what Tom's alluding to, is that, if all of a sudden you lay in a $30+ million judgment debt on top of continuing ownership of the Phoenix Garage and other matters, it really puts the city into a position of their debt now substantially outweighs their fund balances. And so does that risk putting an emergency manager back in? Sure, it does. And you start to combine it with, we don't know the impact that's going to happen with COVID. Certainly the job crisis that's happened, Pontiac has not been immune to that, either to the virus or to the economic impact. We'll see that as it rolls into the next year. And having worked with governments over the years, those things lag, right? So the COVID economic impact will lag on the tax rolls, not going into this current fiscal year, but into the next one. So as we see those things, Mark, the city really can ill afford to take risk of not being proactive against what would be the worst case scenario. And I think that's the point of 66 days is there are some options. There are some things that we can be doing proactively. And they include even, the council president brought forth, and he was able to procure an offer from the owners, and he read that into the record. A little awkward. Usually don't do negotiations in public, but you could work with that if we all collectively came together, created some certainty, and went forward. So hopefully that answers your pretty broad question there.
Well, I think, and there's a question as relates to city council, why did they reverse their decision to start the repairs on the Phoenix Center by approving the contracts, the bid contracts that they had asked for back in May? So
well, listen,
anybody understand the rationale behind that question?
I'm going to jump in before anybody else, because I've got a real definitive opinion on that, and then certainly the mayor and others can chime in. But we have done a very yeoman's job between IDS working very, very quickly, and IDS is the architectural engineering firm that once we finally got that contract awarded in early March, they were able to expedite and speed through. And what a great job that team has done, Dave Tashusho and others, to say, well, we've been guessing at what this is going to cost. Now we know what it's going to cost. And so we have all of those things done. And then so we've done a really masterful job of bringing to the public and bringing to council, well, here's what the reality is. The reality is it's $16.8 million that we could likely get a little cheaper if we bid this correctly, but that's what we're looking at. When the council allocated 7 million, they did that in a way of saying, well, how much excess fund balance do we have in our general fund? They asked the finance director to come up with that number, and guess what the number was? $7.2 million. So they said, well, we'll allocate $7 million towards this, but we have continued to implore upon them that you can't just spend 7 million. There's a whole additional piece that still has to get done in the settlement agreement. So where is the other $9 million going to come from? And when they insisted on us moving forward, we said, well, in defense of the position of the city, we have to do something. IDS and AUK completely turned gears, no additional cost to the city. It's baked within their contract, and said, fine, we'll do the first phase of this. And we brought them the first phase. And I've been in front of them many times saying, remember, we're going to do this to get started on the work, but you have to fund the balance of it. And I think the realization came in that they're unwilling to do it. They were unwilling to bond. They're unwilling to acknowledge that there's $9 more million minimally of work. And I think now the council is, they're just not reacting. And so when they say, why'd they go back on it? Hard to say, because since July 13th, I think, we've been asking to be on the agenda with council to discuss and debate and negotiate this with council. And I have not been able to say one word since that date until today's date at council. Neither has Attorney Chubb, neither has Mayor Waterman. Vince was able to talk a tiny bit, but without things. So they pulled all of that off the record. They acted to deny the bids without any discussion from the professionals. And again, we haven't had an opportunity. So it's a very honest answer, Mark, but that's what's going on.
Tony, would you like to chime in briefly?
Yeah, and I think Matt gave a great explanation. I agree with exactly what he said, but I want to make sure that the public understands when we talk about the limitations on the mayor as a result of the council's inaction. And so, as separate branches of government, what our city council does is appropriates the money. And so until they pass resolutions approving contracts or approving transfers of money, the mayor and the administration have no ability to spend it, even though it's in the account. And so that's when we say we are barred from taking action because of council. It's because we've been given direction by them that, we considered an understanding that if we move forward by getting these bids and by doing these things, that we would then be appropriated the money to actually take it down the field and finish the job, only to be stopped after months of preparation to do what we understood to be direction from the city council. And I think that's really important.
And it appears, I'm hearing different numbers being tossed around. One number was tossed earlier, another number was added. What is the real number for the repairs, and why do the numbers keep changing? I'll give you a chance to respond to that question. We have two more questions before we break. Why have the numbers changed?
Yeah, the numbers, Mark, and for the benefit of the public are very accurate since March. So any number that was before March was a cost probability, meaning the professionals came in and without the ability to complete all of the engineering specifications, the schematic drawings, to have further inspections of the structure so that the engineers could get in and know exactly what they had to do. Anything before March of this year was a probability, meaning we think it's going to cost this. And so when you hear numbers in the past, 18 million and 20 million, those are all probability. And on May 1st of this year, we presented to the council and to the public that AUK, working with IDS as the architectural engineers, were able to break it into 4 categories. So there's critical work and necessary work. That's work that we believe must be completed under the settlement agreement. It includes structural repairs. And I'll remind everyone that there was a huge concrete panel that was going to fall off the Phoenix Center into the right-of-way that certainly could have exposed the city to far greater liability. That was an emergency repair in the spring. And so structural work is critical. The elevators are completely obsolete. And in the settlement agreement, it says replace the elevators. The elevators they can't even move. The electrical systems had been completely stripped from the Phoenix Center. Those core elements are in that critical and necessary work. The HVAC equipment, all of those things are there. It's $16.8 million. We know that with absolute certainty. That's the cost estimate. AUK is one of the best firms in the state. They know exactly what it is. When you add on recommended work, which is work that they are also recommending would be beneficial, but not not critically necessary under the settlement agreement, you're adding on almost $2 million of extra additional work. The final number, which approaches 21 million, which everybody says, oh, I thought you keep saying 20 to 21 million. Well, if the city were to look at it and say, we're going to spend $16.8 million, wouldn't you spend $3 more million and actually repair all of the stormwater on the plaza, complete the repairs to the amphitheater itself so that the city could restore use of the amphitheater? But that is not what we've been asking for all of these months. We've been asking for authority to spend $16.8 million to meet the terms of the settlement agreement. And then we can think about what's in the best interest of the city regarding amphitheater and other matters. And so those are the straight numbers, and the critical number is $16.8 million.
We have about less than 5 minutes remaining. I have a couple other questions, and Tom, I want to ask you from a business standpoint. The Phoenix Center, is from a downtown development standpoint, from a business standpoint, is it still an asset to the city?
Well, very much so. I mean, the whole parking issue, the ability to draw other investors downtown is very important. It's the center of downtown, all right? And as much as possible, if we can maintain it, we can also continue the growth of not only the downtown area, but surrounding areas. Investors like to see, all right, progression. I met with a group of investors yesterday. I mean, they were overwhelmingly enthused about putting more money into Pontiac. Specifically, they were interested in investing in this project. But man, they come to the concern that, hey, if we do that, Tom, how do we assure that we get our money back? And how do we assure, all right, that the city will move very fast to make the right decisions where our money is safe? I'm telling you, as you know, Mark, I was a banker up until the end of this year when we sold the bank. And because of the progress that the city was making 2 years ago, before 2 years ago, the bank wouldn't invest any money in Pontiac, but they saw the progress that was being made. 2 years ago, we invested $10 million. And then last year, we invested $12 million in the city, all right, in its businesses, and a commitment to do even more, all right, with the bank that bought us out. So it's very important to have that kind of facility downtown. The quicker, the better.
I'd like to weigh into that too, because as the executive officer of the city and have gone through the whole era, and a lot of people worked hard to bring the city from the financial stress it was in 6 years ago, where we are right now, where we actually have more options. And it's taken a lot of people who have sacrificed, who suffered, who cooperated. I see on this call some of the partners who played a role in that progress of the city. And I would dread, and so many would dread, to be able to turn that progress back by a wrong financial decision. And certainly a default on the settlement agreement would be a wrong financial decision for the city, which might potentially negate a lot of the progress that has been done. I don't want to paint the picture, but I also want to say that the Phoenix Center is an asset, not only an asset, but it is a symbolic of the revival of Pontiac. One of the things that I was most well recognized for as I became mayor was because of the litigation and because there was no electricity and there was no lighting in the tunnel, that Orchard Lake, that conduit, one of the major east-west conduits across the city, was closed. And so that was a very inconvenient for all the travelers and the commuters and the visitors to have this major conduit right through the heart of our city closed because it went right through the tunnel that had no lighting. So I remember that one of the things that was so well received was when I found the money, and part of that was, even though we were in litigation, I had to go to Oliver Towers and said, you have the only electricity. Please, would you mind helping us light up this tunnel so I can open it up to the travelers once again? And I remember people were just overjoyed that it happened. So I thought that that was just going to be a stopgap for a few months until we could really get going on the rest of this. But not only is it is the key to our downtown, but we are told by the people who know about garages and this kind of structure that once this was overbuilt, and if we do the repairs and the deferred maintenance that hasn't been done, this will last another 40 to 50 years. Okay. And this would cost, as it stands right now, to replace $64 million. $64 million that the city would not have. And that as opposed to $20 million. And then there's so many other ways that the Phoenix Center can be utilized as emblematic of the key to our downtown. As our downtown develops, and we see a lot of that's going on with all the new businesses that are coming in, that we're bringing in a revitalized city that they're getting with some consideration of, that they're going to need parking to fulfill our downtown. A lot of cities are crippled by the fact that they don't have adequate parking. This is what we have here. The city doesn't have to look at just one option for how we do this. And there are many other people who are now coming forward with other options in terms of it's an opportunity zone for some investor. And also there's public-private partnerships. We've introduced a couple of those thoughts to council and how even we can separate the amphitheater, which is what the people would like to have their festivals and things on the amphitheater, and the city not being in the garage business. So there's many ways to do that. But first, council has to make sure we save it as an asset for the city. We don't go back into financial difficulty and stress because of a wrong financial decision. We're going the right way. And I'm just so happy that all the people now who are interested in helping to weigh in on this and to have the right information that this is the PSA that we're doing. And Mark, once again, this is the topic we chose for this month. And certainly that's what they call trending right now.
Trending.
And so as we wind down, I just wanted to put in those closing comments as you wind down this discussion.
And as we wind down, we do have one question from, I think it's very, this will be the final question, we'll wrap up. Jeremy, I think he has a sentiment of probably the residents of the city. And what is the likelihood of this settlement being amended to allow Pontiac to perform under the agreement, number one? And then really at the bottom line of all this, if this does not work out, is Pontiac again in danger of Lansing coming in to take over? Who would like to answer that question?
Well, the first part of it, Mark, is is there a chance that the agreement can get amended? The owner of the towers, who's the plaintiff in the case, has written some language that that we don't need to read in this meeting and try to keep it a little more positive, but it has definitely been extremely negative towards the view of the city going forward. So is it possible? Yes. The only way it's possible is if there is a sudden and aggressive collaboration to move forward. So at last week's meeting, we were asking the council to please reconsider the rejection of the consideration of bonds or the partial funding for the first phase. And instead, the council president read an offer purportedly from the owner for the city to buy the whole project. Now, that would be in excess of $25 million. And if we had $25 million laying around, we probably wouldn't be in this predicament. But even those angles were all closed off. And so could we amend the agreement, buy ourselves more time? Yes. We could. It would require the consent of the plaintiff. And so if the people in the community and the business owners put themselves in the shoes of the Ottawa Towers owner after 2 years of nothing being done, what's the likelihood of that? And so that follows up with what's the likelihood of receivership? There's other issues that are out there that could be a whole nother conversation with the mayor, which is the economic impact of the delays in the medical marijuana licensing aspect, which is that's looming over the city as well. Those delays really outside of the mayor's control. And so there's lots of things looming. And when the mayor implores that it would just be so imprudent to let this be a fiscal irresponsibility, those are the types of things that Lansing would look at. And the city would not be immune to having them look again and saying it's appropriate for the city to look at financial management again.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Mayor. I'll give you the final word in a second. Tony Chubb, City Attorney, thank you very much. Matthew Gibb, thank you very much. Tom Kimball, thank you for contributing to this all-important conversation. And the mayor's not kidding. This is a trending topic. Mayor Waterman, before we break, I would like to give you the final comments in 15 seconds or so. What would you like to say in closing?
I just like to say that Pontiac has come so far. We've changed the narrative of a city of Pontiac. This is a city now which is no longer known as the donut, as the whole weak second cousin. We're happy for all the partnerships and the economic development that we brought to the city, as well as all the attributes for our neighborhoods. We are now going to be celebrated as a city that will be blight-free, according to the standards we had. Has made a difference in our property values. We see now that Pontiac is now an attractive place to do business. So there are some still lingering issues as cities have, and that's why we're bringing this forward, because we want to give people real information, real-time follow-up. That's what we are. We want to be transparent. We want to be frank, but we want to be progressive in our thinking. Go
Thank you.
Pontiac. Have a great day. Stay safe, stay healthy. In this era of COVID-19, we want to make sure that that's still something that we need to guard against, but we as a city are moving forward. And I thank you, Mark, for being part of that conversation. And
My
we'll see you
pleasure.
next
Thank
time.
you, everyone. We'll give you the next date for the next one. We'll be in September. In the meantime, stay safe and have a wonderful Labor Day weekend as well that's upcoming. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you all.
Same to you.
Thank you.